Hello, we are back with the Grown Ass Business Show, and we're talking to somebody that I really admire and respect today. So, what we're doing, in case this is your first time tuning in, we're breaking down how she did it. How did she build her business? The good, the bad, the ugly, the truth, and what's coming. Because ultimately, we're going to show you that business looks different on everyone. So today I have Vanessa Shaw. I'm not doing the whole formal fancy bio and all the things. Vanessa and I met at an event last year, and she mentioned the name of her podcast, one of her brands, Get Rich Without Being a Bitch. And my ear immediately went, who is that woman there? I want to know her. So Vanessa, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. I loved. We had so many good conversations at that retreat. So you were definitely one of the great things that came from that retreat. So I'm excited to have our conversation today, Sally.
Yeah. So tell us about your business and what you do, first of all.
Yeah. So today, business is specializing in working with women professional services, mainly tend to be women attorneys who run their own law firms. And they're really great at what they do, but they're not so good at the business side of things. And they're typically pretty overwhelmed and frustrated, wanting to grow, wanting to make a bigger impact. And that's what we help them with, coaching in a very holistic way. Shudder when I say that term, because we really do look at all aspects of business, but we have a big component on personal leadership and who they're being. And their energy and all these other things that come into play as well.
Yeah. And there's something specific that I love about your origin story, but can you tell us why you started your business and when in your life you started your business?
Yeah. So let's see. I've been in business nearly 20 years now. I was a stay-at-home mum. So I had my kids. I knew I wanted to do something. By the time I was looking at returning to work, I felt like I was pretty unemployable at that point. Plus, my husband had a big global career, and it was like it felt like there wasn't space for us to, do both. And so I actually trained as a life coach back then. I was living in Switzerland. I got a life coaching certification. I honestly didn't even know what a life coach really was back then. It was certainly new. But the life coaching, no sooner, the truth is, Sally, I actually hadn't even, I think, been properly certified. And I had an opportunity. And I was actually working with some women at the time. I was doing weight loss coaching. I was trying to get some money in that was basically funding my coaching certification because it was in London and I was having to travel and everything. And it was one of my client's husbands. I happened to be over at her house for a session. And he heard me talking and was like, hey, could you work with me? I've got a big job. I need to get some energy. I'm not in great shape right now. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And we would have these walk and talk sessions on a Monday morning. I was later to find out that he said they were like the favorite part of his week before he went off and flew all around, Europe doing his thing. And he then gave me an opportunity to come and pitch my services inside his law firm. And it was Europe's largest law firm. It still is today. It's one of the biggest law firms, certainly up there in probably the top 10, I think, in the world. And so here I was, this stay-at-home mum that was doing weight loss coaching, that was going through life coaching certification. I think by that point, I probably, had been inked, but, I was so new. And I'm being flown up to London to do a PowerPoint presentation to, I think there were about 55 equity partners and like senior attorneys in the room. I had no idea how to do a PowerPoint presentation. I'd never done anything like this. I mean, as a stay-at-home mom, I wasn't doing things like that.
Well, also, the thought of you not knowing how to do a PowerPoint presentation is hilarious to me now because I know.
Like, what do you mean you wouldn't know how to do that? But I truly didn't. I was so nervous as well. I really didn't know what I was going into. But I also knew, that this was an opportunity, right? It was really that stretch moment. And truth, behind the scenes, my husband, who did know PowerPoint, he put together this little presentation for me, and then he made me go through it with him. So I actually had to go do the whole thing with him. I'm not
That's
sure which one was more terrifying, whether it was doing it for my husband or in the room. And I burst into tears at one point with my husband. I was so nervous. Anyway, I fly up to London, and actually two things actually happened. Is I had the PowerPoint presentation because I'm very nervous about moving the slides and everything. I realized in the moment that I couldn't really follow a PowerPoint presentation. So here I am in front of this audience, and I just started to speak, and I was going off the cuff, and I was kind of like moving a few slides along and like using them as a prompt. But I realized that I just couldn't keep my focus there because it's like I've got the people in front of me. And so I actually discovered that I was definitely a front of room speaker in that moment.
yeah.
And true story, my sponsor, Duncan is his name, that brought me in. I sat back down, like, because he was in the back of the room. And as I sat back down, he went, "Whoa, what just happened? Like, you're really good up there." So it was like, oh, what did just happen? You know, all this nervousness. So I discovered a new, and let's say a hidden talent was one thing. And then the second piece was I then had an opportunity to follow up with the partners to see who was interested. And now what I've pitched is a peak performance coaching program, you know, that was it was still about stress and where things were getting in the way and how they were kind of neglecting themselves for the business and all the rest of it. So it was kind of life coachy as opposed to business. And we got a beta program started. And then, of course, I had to pitch the price for it. And, you know, now I've got to kind of put a price to this. And I negotiated it as a 6-figure deal because I've pitched it to a law firm. I knew full well I had to come in at a really decent price because
Right.
otherwise they wouldn't take me seriously.
Right.
And, you know, I can't remember now how many partners I was working with. I mean, it was not a lot, but I pitched it as a 6-figure deal. And then they covered at the time, I think there were about 10 regional offices in 10 different countries in Europe. And I'm like, I don't want to be traveling. My kids were young. That doesn't fit for me. And so I then pitched it as a virtual 6-figure coaching program.
Oh my
And
God.
so I believe that I probably launched the first ever virtual coaching program inside a law firm. I obviously don't really have, you know, any way to prove that, but certainly
Yeah.
nobody was doing that back in the day.
That's amazing. Well, I actually didn't know that part, but I think that makes you cooler. See, so already, I always say this to my clients. I think, you know, sometimes people think, oh, you're just such a drill sergeant. You're such a doer. And it's like, no, it's because in the doing, you become the person you need to
Mm-hmm.
become. You don't become the person by thinking about it, right? And obsessing
Totally.
about it and even meditating. You still got to stand up in front of the room
Yeah.
and do the thing. That the doing transforms you. So I love that. And you also just created a whole new thing. And
I
now
create.
your business has like completely morphed though. Now you
Yeah,
own it.
and I'll kind of go through a couple of the different iterations because I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's really helpful.
Yes,
I
totally.
mistakenly thought when I went into business myself, I was so naive. I mistakenly thought that there was one day when I would figure it all out, and then you just
Can
step back.
you just say that again? We need to, because we all have this mistake.
I honestly thought that unlike life, where it's constantly kind of evolving, for some reason I thought that business was like this thing, like static in a way, that
Mhm.
once you've done it and got it to the level that you want it to go to, it's just this, right?
Yeah.
And I remember there was a real wake up when I kind of like, whoa, it's always evolving and it's a live thing and it's organic and we're constantly creating and co-creating and all the rest of it. So that was a bit of a wake up call. I actually worked inside the law firm for probably close to about 4 years, grew that program. We actually coached several levels. They asked me, I actually had coaches working for me at some point as well, because it was A, I didn't want to be working that hard. B, different expertise that I was bringing in. So it was a really, really great time. And then the truth be told, my passion had gone. It
Mm.
was easy money. My lifestyle was great, but my passion was no longer there for what I
Mhm.
was doing. And I knew that I kind of had golden handcuffs and that there was something else kind of calling me. Yet I didn't have the courage to leave because it was like, well, I've built this thing. It feels good. It feels easy, say, being paid a lot for it. And I didn't have the courage to leave. So sometimes when we don't have the courage to actually do something ourselves, it's interesting how the universe kind of starts to close some doors.
Something
And
happens. Yeah.
and there were big changes inside the law firm that basically meant they were disbanding the program, divvying it up differently, and Vanessa was being shown the door out. And I panicked, Sally. I mean, I had no idea. I built something inside a business. I didn't know sales and marketing. I didn't know how to replace that revenue. I didn't know all of these things that I didn't know. I had been living life really well. We had really started our travel bug. As you know, I travel a lot. It's
Yeah.
just my joy to just travel and see different places. And we were doing that with kids and flying them all around the world. And Thailand was a big place that we were going to back then. So I was spending a lot of money, business savvy, and lose the contract, which meant I'd lost about, I think it was somewhere in the region of 85 to 90% of my income. I had a couple of private clients, like life coachy clients still in the wings, but they were not paying me very much at all. And now I've gone and lost this big contract. My lifestyle, has really expanded. I didn't have cash cushion in the bank
I'm like
either.
leaning in. I'm like, I did not know this part of the story either. What did you do?
And I get a call from my Swiss accountant telling me that if I don't change things soon, I need to file bankruptcy. And I'm like, what? What did you say? And this is all in French as well. I'm like, what? And I'm like, what does that mean? And so massive panic stations, massive shame. How the heck did I kind of create this mess? How was I going to get out of it? Because I just didn't have a clue as how I was going to turn things around. And as I say, I was like, I've asked my family to believe in me. We've up leveled everything. It's all about there was a lot of focus on my business back in those days. And here I am, with an accountant telling me I'm going to have to file for bankruptcy. So definitely a very, a couple of dark nights of the soul. And what the heck am I going to do? And how am I going to, am I just going to crawl into a hole here? And what am I going to do? Bless my husband. He was always been so, so incredibly supportive of my business. And he was like, you're really good at what you do. Like you are really good at what you do. You kind of got to figure out what you want to do next, because the truth is you weren't that into it anymore, and like find your new direction. And then you got to figure out how to get some new clients. And we had a morning where we sat with post-it notes in the kitchen, and sort of he helped me just get some ideas out of my head. I decided that I needed to get out networking. I needed to go and speak to people. So I joined a networking group in Switzerland. It was very stuffy, by the way. It was a really stuffy British Swiss Chamber of Commerce, but it was not kind of like the fun. I find networking a lot more fun in the States, but this was just very formal. But anyway, I went there, and I also hired a sales coach. There was a new guy in town. He'd been in the States. He ran a Sandler franchise, and he was trying to get his business off the ground. He was very, very good at what he did. And I knew I needed to learn sales skills. I knew that if there was one place I was going to turn things around, I just knew that sales was the only piece that brought in the money. It wasn't me sitting around and putting together a fancy website. And I hired him. Guess what, right? Not sitting around just tweaking things. Hired him at a time when I could ill afford to, because remember, no clients, accountant is saying you're heading into bankruptcy. I did a deal with him whereby whatever it was is I would pay him, there's some sort of payment plan, I think it was. I think back then he was flat fee. And I was like, I just can't do that, but I think I can do a payment plan and whatever that looked like. And he was like, sure. And I think he gave me a bit of a discount because he was looking for a good case study because he was setting up his business. So we kind of again, made the deal. And he taught me how to pitch. And he was like, you've got to get cash in the door quickly. You need to put together a quick offer of what you already know that you can do. Doesn't have to be for forever, but you've got to get cash in the door. So actually going off to this networking group, there were opportunities where you could speak for 5 minutes. Well, I knew that I could speak in the front of the room, right? And I was like, let's do that. And I made an offer in the front of the room. In that moment, I think I signed up 6 new clients at $1,800 a pop.
Wow.
So Not too shabby, not too shabby. And
Yeah.
this is quite some time ago as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I've worked out, I do know I can get clients, and people want this. And so that was really the iteration then of my business model starting to shift, right? It's like, what do I really want to be doing? What am I passionate about? I had, by the way, when I was working in the law firm, I had skilled up a lot. I had invested in myself heavily. I was working with coaches, but I had trained in emotional intelligence. I'm a fully high level trained executive coach
Mm.
with a lot of psychological models. I did a lot of that training with CEOs. I was the non-CEO in the room at the time. So I'd got a lot of skill set because I'd invested in myself. And now it was time to sort of pull that together and put it into new coaching programs. So fast forward, I rebuilt the business. And then I think it was probably a year into that I was now really paying attention to my own desires. What did I want? What did I want to create in the world? And that's when I had my come to Jesus moment of, I actually no longer want to be living in Europe and I want to move to the States. And
Right.
so I rebuilt the business only to kind of tear it down again. And in 2012, I brought my family to the States. In fact, my husband stayed behind in Switzerland for 2 years because he was finishing out his career. So I actually came over as a single mom and for 2 years to rebuild the business. And it was
So
as I
you
flew across.
can reinvent yourself. It's
Totally,
okay.
totally.
Yeah, that is amazing. I did not know all those details, but that even makes more sense because I'm so impressed. People are always surprised, but I'm an introvert. You get me in a networking room and I'm like the girl in the corner, like with her book. Totally in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing at that time. That's me. But I love that you were like, oh yeah, I decided to come to the US, reinvent my business. And you started going to networking events in the
Totally.
US and like you know
Yes.
everyone in the business coaching industry. And I'm like, how did you do that?
Did I do that? I mean, it was, I think again though, right? It's like, I think some of the really important things here though, is like if we unpack a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Of how or why I did certain things. There was that turnaround moment, right? There was the law firm, the opportunity. I knew there was an opportunity. I knew that was a gift and it was an opportunity to step up, right? And I was trusting my instincts and my gut there and going for it. However, I felt scared. And it was a really beautiful ride. When I came to the States, there was a big why, right? Of like rebuilding it. Well, sorry, they're rebuilding it in Switzerland. There was a big why because I was running from shame and I was running from a bankruptcy, okay, or needing to file a bankruptcy, which I never did. Then I get to the States. I've got a big why because now I've put my family on the line again and I've moved everybody to the States. And I
Mm.
asked my husband to believe in me, and he didn't want to leave Switzerland. That was actually part of our kind of wedding contract. So a verbal contract is he said, never, ever ask me to leave Switzerland. I love it here. So this is a big ask, right? To get him
Mm.
on board to follow. So now I had to make it work, Sally. It's like,
Yeah.
there's no way to make it work. And I landed and I never took a break. I remember I didn't even have furniture in the office because, everything had been shipped over. I mean, I kind of had a laptop on a chair. I was just trying to figure things out. I'd done this networking thing. I've now learned that, the States was like a networking mecca where I had such limited choice in Switzerland. It was like, there's so much you can do all day long here. And, I started to go to these networking events, not unknown, obviously I sound very different in the market. So I stand out as a foreigner. And I started to, again, just have coffees with people, lunch with people. I kissed a lot of frogs. I had a lot of people pitching me as the new girl in town. That happened a lot, so I started to get good with boundaries
Yeah.
because I started to see that, people were just seeing me as this vulnerable new person, pitching me all sorts of things that I didn't need. But I, again, started to get clients. But I think we moved here end of July, just so that there's a timeline here. August, my husband actually went back to Switzerland the beginning of September. Obviously, I had to get kids enrolled in schools as well, which is August. So he was kind of here for that. Beginning of September, he then goes back to Europe. He's got to get back to work. And by the beginning of October, I have signed up my first VIP day client.
Wow.
So that was the timeline. And in that space, I still had clients in Europe, that I was kind of phasing out. So I was
Right.
transitioning. And so I was actually getting up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to work with my clients in Europe so I could
Yeah.
go networking and then land my first US client.
You're a true entrepreneur.
I had to though, right? For me, it's
Yeah.
like just I had to. I had to make it work. I
Yeah.
just put the family. I've brought them all into this vision and this idea and everything. And it's like, no, I've just got to make this work.
I totally get that because sometimes people ask me, who are the kind of people that do the best in your programs? Who are the people? What are the characteristics of your favorite clients? And I'm like, the ones I love are the ones who it has to work.
Hmm.
So sometimes people think I'm a single mom of two or of three, or, whatever the constraint is that you believe is your identity and that you use as your crutch. I'm like, actually, some of my best clients are the ones who had something happen and then they've had a business partner take everything out of the bank account and be broke and start over. Some of my
Yeah,
best clients are single moms of three children and it has to work. Like my
got to.
favorite people are the ones who are just like, this has to work. I'm like,
Yeah,
game on, let's
yeah.
go. Yeah.
So I think that was it. That was just that driving, the driving force for it. And here was again, if we talk in iterations of business models, now I'm really tapping into what's the work I love to do? What are the conversations I love to be in? What are the problems I love to solve? Who am I really passionate about serving? And if we go back to kind of that money story that I was faced with back in
Mhm.
Europe, I realized that I had a very dysfunctional relationship with money. I was good at bringing it in. I was not good at keeping it, right? So I was
Yeah.
earning a lot of money, spending it, kind of seemed to be uncomfortable at some level of like actually keeping it. What a strange notion that would be. Like now when I look back on it, I'm like, God, that was interesting. I thought I was alone and that was a me thing. And as I started to chat with women, I found that was so prevalent. This is something that I wasn't alone. So many other women were struggling with this. And so that was also where I was really tapping into. It was like, I want to be helping women earn more money. My practice was pretty much 80 to 90% male. And I was really feeling drawn to serving women. And so as I came across here, that's how my practice flipped. I went from 80% men to 80% women. I've always had a few guys I work with in my private practice, but I really flipped the switch. And then I then took that earlier speaking. Remember back when I've
Mhm.
discovered that I'm actually really good at the front of the room, and I actually don't need PowerPoints, and I can be unscripted for days. I was like, I want to have a live event model. So now I'm completely reinventing, right, the business. And I had a live event model of business for years where I
Yeah.
would fill rooms and, we typically had about 150, 120, 150 women in rooms for 3 days. And now I'm making offers from, like I did back in those early days. It's
Yeah.
interesting where those skill sets came from. But, now I'm pitching programs from the front of the room and signing up women into year-long programs. And that was wonderful.
I have a question about this, though. I think you just made me realize something really important. How long did it take you from your first iteration of your business to that day where how many years was it before you got to that place where you actually said, okay, wait, what do I really like doing and who is really my person? Because that's
Oh,
really what we're talking about is product market fit. But how long did it actually take you to even start being honest about what it was you wanted to be doing?
yeah. And I think, again, it's always evolving, right? Because as we evolve, it evolves. That's the
Yeah.
thing. I would say 6 years, 6 years, 7 years, if I think
Yeah.
back. Really, end of 2005, I think, is when I first went into business.
So all
Um,
of you who are frustrated in year one or two, okay. It's a very normal journey to not know all the answers and have
yeah,
it all perfect by year two or year
yeah,
three.
yeah. No, it's definitely six. Yeah, we were definitely year 6 or year 7, something like that. Yeah.
So then you had this live speaking event model, and then that changed again.
So yeah, I did that I did my first live event in 2013.
Wow.
I was new, by the way. This is again,
Yeah.
I think this is really important for people to know because they're like, but I don't know people. I'm like, I didn't know people. I was
Yeah.
new. I
Yeah, this
arrived
is
here.
really, we need to drive this home because this whole
I,
like, I don't know anyone, I don't have a net, like new person, new country, change,
yes,
like completely starting over. Yeah.
completely starting over. It was the following year. So I arrived here and I said I signed up my first like VIP day client, I think in October 2012. So I always saw that as, okay, I've got one, I can do more, right? Once I've got one, I can do another one. And so I was kind of rolling, with custom programs. I actually landed an executive client who actually lived in my neighborhood. I was invited to a party that December and end up chatting to this guy who says, "Hey, I'm looking for a coach." A true story. I'd had way too much champagne at the time. I was like, "Good Lord, I hope I remember this tomorrow," because there was champagne flowing. I was letting my hair down, and I followed up with him. He became an amazing, amazing executive client. Again, kind of I did some work internally with him. So I'm off to the races, and it was the following. I think it was the following October, so 12 months later, that I had my first live event. So I've rented a room, a ballroom, small ballroom in a hotel. I'm just trying to think how many people actually came. Just trying to think how many people were in that room. 45, 50, something like that. It might have been back then. I honestly can't remember. First live event. And that's when I then pitched my first year-long program in the States and kind of created that group year-long from the front of the room and signed up, a bunch of people into that program.
That's amazing. Like, wow, 50 people in my first live event. That's really good. What would you say? Because as a person who over the years has reinvented, started over, what do you think are your unique characteristics, though, that have allowed you to do that over and over and over again?
That's a great question. I think I've really learned this over the years. I think this is, again, thanks to a lot of the emotional intelligence work that I did, back as part of executive coaching. I'm very in tune with myself emotionally,
Okay.
very in tune. And a lot of that work was about disconnecting. When I was working with executives, a lot of it was about, it's not like we need to disconnect from the head and everything that's going up here and get more into our hearts and like really what's our heart wants, right? There's a lot of intelligence here that speaks to our desires and what we really want. But so oftentimes we're just so busy up here that we never stop. And I think that
Mm.
was thanks to a lot of that work study. I was teaching it. I was running workshops as I kind of changed my business model as well. And think, before I moved to the States, I was running a lot of those workshops. So I was very present to the work. For me, I believe it is very important. I'm in integrity with the work and I'm practicing what I'm actually teaching.
Mhm.
So it just became very embodied, let's say. It's a very natural part of who I am today. Back then, it would have been more consciously needing to integrate. And I truly believe that our desires are like, they're the gateway. Like we've got to pay attention and really follow. They're like these like seeds, if we like, that we can start to follow. Most of us have been taught that our desires are wrong, right?
Yeah.
Or
Or we don't even know how to listen to them.
we don't know how to listen to them, because who actually sits us down and has that conversation around, yeah, what is it that you desire? What is it that you're kind of secretly, playing out the whole time? Those sort of
Mm.
what ifs, like, what if we give that permission?
Yeah.
Um, right, and give it a voice. And not every desire needs to be acted upon, right? Not at all. But the ones that have been there for a long time, I believe, are like the desires of our soul and our calling. And I think I started to listen to those more and more. And so it was most definitely a calling for me to come to the States. And it got to the point where the year before I came here, I think I came 7 times in a year. I just was feeling so, I kept just drawn, right? So there's an entrepreneurial energy that exists in the States that I really, really love. And I was just so drawn to that. And now my desires are just getting stronger and stronger. I honestly felt like I just couldn't shut them down. And that's partly why I think I was able to be so powerful and clear in that conversation with my husband when I basically had to say to him, I want us to leave where we're at and I want us to come to Switzerland, leave Switzerland and actually come to the States, even though that wasn't part of his bigger plan.
I mean,
But I think
I can't imagine how that conversation went down.
amazingly smoothly, actually. So I think I was just so aligned.
Yeah.
And And I kind of had the business case for why it was going to work. I mean, pitched it to
Yeah.
it in a way that he could hear it and take it on board. And he did. He got super on board with it.
Yeah.
And if you ask him today, he loves our time in the States. And do we still feel European? And I mean, he's American, right? Do we still, of course we love going to Europe, and that's how we kind of do both. We spend a lot of time there in the summer.
Yeah. Well, and I have to ask this because I just love this thing that you do. Speaking of no shame, um, where did Get Rich Without Being a Bitch, when was that born?
Yeah, so the concept of that has actually been around, just trying to think, again, quite a few years, right? It's not I dreamt that up yesterday. There was something percolating, and this might be 2018-ish, something like that. So perhaps 5 years ago. I think it's probably in about that time frame. And I felt like there was something, coming through with women, and it was taking me a long time to really articulate what it was. And it was actually a friend of mine. We were brainstorming and, saying all these silly things. I said, I know it's got, there's something in there about not being a bitch. I knew that piece. And that was linked to my own internal story. I was so concerned that I needed to become like a cold-hearted bitch in order to get ahead in business. I didn't realize that I had this programming,
Mm.
and so worried about being perceived that way that I would go to the other extreme of trying to be overly nice or overly accommodating, overly people pleasing, right? Because so concerned about being this, and that's what we tend to do. We tend to overcompensate. So the title, I think, probably came to life in about 2015. And then I didn't know really what it was. That was the other thing. It was like, well, I've got this title. And so it was just there. And then I started to, do some work around it, start to think about what are the 10 principles, what would be the principles. So there's like 10 principles. They're like guiding principles for Get Rich Without Being a Bitch. And then I launched my podcast. And the podcast, to be quite honest, I mean, anybody can listen and check in. Please do. And if you do, write a review. Something I'm supposed to be asking for reviews. Yes, write a review. But I launched the podcast and I didn't have a really great plan. And then the podcast went on, its own hiatus as well for a while. So it wasn't a perfect plan. I launched it. I learned what I didn't like about it. And then I took quite a bit of time to relaunch it. So we actually relaunched it this year, and I am so much happier with the content. Again, this is about being true to myself, Sally. It was about what are the conversations I want to be having? And
Yeah.
back then I was interviewing, and it's not that I won't interview, I will. I know there'll be interviews. But right now I felt like, no, I've actually got a lot to say. And I want my thoughts and my content out.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to go check it out right now. I love that there's these principles because we've talked about your whole idea, but I didn't know that there are these 10 principles. I'm like, I want to know what the 10 principles are
I think
because
that was a piece of work I probably did after you and I met, to be quite honest. I think that was
okay.
kind of how that came together. Yeah, give me a
Yeah.
frame. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious because you've done so much, and I am going to check out your podcast because, of course, you have things to say. You have real traction. You have a real track record in your business, and I'm sure you have tons of great things to say. I'm going to check it out. What are you excited about in your business? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah. So, actually, lots right now, which is a good feeling because, again, and I want to say that honestly, I have gone in and out of love, the intensity around my business, and often that has been I've used it as a signal to say it's time to change up the business model, right? So I'm no longer doing the live events, for example, listen to my instincts there. And then COVID hit, which I'm really grateful. I'd already changed my business model before COVID. And so there've been times when it's like, kind of feeling a little grindy in it. Right now, I am very excited about, as I say, the podcast and really getting that out in a bigger way. I want to be podcast guesting again with a kind of new direction and new energy. So that's something. We are kind of niching down into, as I said, professional services firms. That's really who we do our best work with, and particularly people that are really trading their knowledge, right, for money. So in our case, we've worked with a lot of financial people, financial women, medical, doctors, and legal. And I've kind of come full circle right now with the law firm piece, because the truth is, when I was kind of working in big law, I was very resistant. Everyone kept saying, you should be working with law firms. And I was really resistant. I love small law. I love working with the smaller firms where I'm working directly with the owners. And so that's a direction that we're going right now. And I love it. These women are incredibly smart. They are fun to work with. They've typically got a lot of energy. They do not shy away from hard work. A lot of attorneys as well, they can be activists. They might be involved in, their local communities or politics and things like that. They often have an impact piece, which I find very attractive to work with as well. So that feels very exciting. The book that I've told you I've procrastinated on it, and I'm keeping that one honest. I think there will be a really good reason as to why I've procrastinated. I'm birthing it,
Yeah.
internally before it comes out. But I know full well there is no way I'm going into the end of the year and heading into next year without a substantial amount of it written. And I did just recently mention to Robert that I think I'm going to take myself away to Sedona or something for a good few days and hole up and kind of get a significant amount done.
Yeah.
So that I'm really excited about. And then we're also in a place right now, again, where we're kind of like the business is just we're starting to get a little complex and a little messy. And so we're, going back in and looking at systems and processes and streamlining, making some things simpler. And again, that actually feels good. In the past, that might have been something that I'd be like, not necessarily my sweet spot, but again, I love kind of streamlining. I love organizing my home, and I'm seeing it in the sense of we're organizing the business. Just like, and I think this is good for people to know, how you organize your home and then it gets messy and it needs some maintenance. I think our businesses are no different.
I love that, because I think that people do expect that their business, I'm gonna have my marketing machine, I'm gonna have my offer, I'm gonna have my back end CRM or whatever system I use, and then I get to just set it and forget it. I think we do have that idea about our businesses. And if you think about it, well, how many times a week do you organize your home? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always ongoing. So yeah, I feel very excited about the women that I'm speaking to as well. Right now we're having some just great conversations with women that are looking for support with coaching programs. And I think this is the other, and their business growth, obviously. I think the more great messages, the more we are resonant with who we want to work with and
Yeah.
really get aligned and get excited about that and like step into their world and really understand their world and their struggles. It's amazing how we are so much more resonant with attracting the type of women that we want to work with. And we've just signed up a bunch of new clients and they are just all amazing. But that was me making that decision and going, right, this is the next iteration of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that clarity of who do I help? How do I help them? How do I resonate with them? When you know them really well, then the way you show up resonates with them.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I love that. Thank you for giving us the full intricate story. I think this is really valuable. I really appreciate your honesty also of it's not, you're sometimes in it and sometimes you're out of it, right?
Yeah.
You're sometimes alivened by your business and sometimes you're not. And I think, again, that's really normal, and it's just not going to be the same every day and feel the same every day. I think
It's a
that's really
relationship,
honest.
right? I mean, I've been married for nearly 30 years. So it's 30 years next year. Let's face it, we're not always passionately in love with one another either, right? There are
Yeah.
times when, it can be a little bit blah, or we're not connected, or there's times when it's like, oh my gosh, soulmate of my life.
Yeah.
So I think, giving ourselves permission to see that we're in relationship with our business, and
Yeah.
it's going to change and it's going to have twists and turns. And sometimes the business that we started is not the one that we're going to finish with. And
Yeah.
it's all okay.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, we are in relationship with our business. Exactly. So, where can the people find you? Obviously, we're all running to go listen to your podcast now. You're going to be my new walking buddy. And where can people find you? Where is the best way?
So website, businessgrowthacademy.com. Find me there. There's a free download as well, the $1 Million Question. It's my little short book that we talked about before we put the
Yeah.
recording on, that you've been working on that as well. So that's the $1 Million Question is a great starting place. You have to download the book to find out what it is. And then also I'm hanging out on Instagram a lot more these days as well. I'm
Okay.
just liking Instagram, and I think I'm going to be making more of a shift over there. So yeah, like come follow on Instagram and then we can chat and I can see what you're up to as well.
Okay.
I think Vanessa Shaw Coach on Instagram.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing
Oh,
this.
thank you. So good to reconnect.
Yes, I appreciate you.
Right
And
back at you.
there we go. There's another one in the books.